Sitting here on the couch on a Saturday morning, clear head, early, sun still hasn't come up. Impossible thing not so long ago, or if I'd have made it up at this hour, I'd have been feeling just absolutely awful. And I'm editing together a podcast here. You're about to hear from my friend Sebastien LeTellier. He's an artist manager in LA. You'll hear about his work as we go along. So I met him at my musicians meeting that I go to every week, and it's pretty cool. Like, I got to watch Sebastien come in, meaning he was, I think he was a week sober, and he talks about that. He said he's about 9 days sober when he comes in, and he just stayed. So here we are 2.5 years later, and I've watched his evolution over this period of time, and one of the most insightful people I've come across. I'm always interested and attracted to people that don't say what everybody else is saying, but throw a curveball. And he does that in the best ways. Like, we'll be on a topic and he'll just bring a new angle to it that's like, whoa, that's cool, and that's honest. Love honesty in meetings. And yeah, I've just learned a ton from him in this period of time, and I've got a chance to watch watch him change over time. I think that's safe to say, although that used to irritate me when people that had been around a little while would, say things like that. It would sound like they were judging. Oh, looks like you've come a long way or whatever. That would have irritated me a lot, and did irritate me when I first got started. But I'm gonna say it anyway, and hopefully, Sebastien, you're cool with that. But yeah, it's been awesome. I feel honored and grateful that he showed up at this meeting that I go to every week, and he's just shared tons of cool things. And so now I'm giving you the opportunity to listen to a conversation between the two of us. And so let's get into it. This is the intro part where I pretend like I know what I'm talking about. Not really. It's great to see you, Sebastien. I'm here, folks, with my friend Sebastien. We've been going to the same meeting now for it's been a while. We'll be able to know because just a little after you got sober, you showed up, right?
Yeah, so it's been about 2 years. I have a day counter that I occasionally take a look at. Let's see where we're at. 2 years and 4 months.
2 years and 4 months. And did you come to that meeting, the Music Cares meeting? Like, what's the timeline for you is when you show up there?
Maybe like about 9 days into being sober.
Okay, so right at the beginning. Okay, so when I met you, you were fresh off the boat.
I'm getting sober. It was a lot of research. The next week was putting into effect. So then I got sober on a Monday, and not the Wednesday of that week, which was our meeting, but the following Wednesday I was in. So, however many days that is.
So yeah, so we've gotten to know each other for a while. I'm not big on saying what I'm about to say, but maybe it's okay. I always like, I'm going to cut out a lot of this probably, but I think I've seen you make a change over time, right? And from the first days that you showed up to later, and me, I'm not much on this idea that as you get more sober, you're, become better or whatever else, but change is different than better or worse, right? So I would love to explore that with you. You got 2 years of sobriety and then some change underneath your belt, and I've had the wonderful opportunity to be across from you one day a week for 2 years plus. What's your self-evaluation on what it's like to what has happened, Sebastien? What has happened for you in this time?
Well, I think the biggest change has been definitely the reason why I'm sober. I got into it like most people because things had just become unmanageable. I had for a long time overdone it, to put it lightly. And there was a period of time for maybe maybe about 2 years of, I really like, it's always in my mind, you can't keep on like this forever. But I was young and thought, push will come to shove, like life happens and you chill out. And as I got older, I realized that wasn't happening and I needed to dial it back. And so, like a lot of us, my first step was more so, how do I do this the right way? As in, like, how do I keep drinking like everyone else? And that lasted a couple years. And for a good portion of the end of it, I had myself convinced that I had this down right and I could do it. Like, I could drink once in a while. Once in a while, it was turned into semi-regularly, which then got out of control, which then I dialed back and just recalibrated and kind of kept that going. And there was just a difficult period of time in the 6 months before deciding to get sober that I kind of threw in the towel on myself and I stopped trying to keep it under control. And that's when it got really out of control, worse than it ever had. And it showed me that, yes, I can control this, I guess, or at least at the time, I thought that was my mindset then. I have a different mindset now, but then when I decided to, it's like, I can control this, but it's becoming harder and harder every time I get out of control to rein it back in. And the consequences were just mounting higher and higher. And so when I first got sober, I didn't know if it was forever. I mean, I did say forever, but I had told myself that before. So like part of me didn't believe that. And getting into the program and accepting things and starting to see that this was, for me at least, turned into not a program of stay away from drinking, but a program of that is one of the requirements to being part of this group. But for me, being part of the group is to become happier in my life with who I am, with how I encounter situations. I came to realize that I was always, the problems that I had when I felt like I needed a drink, they didn't go away because I stopped drinking. I needed to then find new ways to deal with it. So out of desperation of how do I deal with this without drinking, I really did adopt what I was learning in the program, and I needed it. I needed to find a way to cope. And if I wasn't going to drink, I was open to something else. And when I started learning what those things are, it made me realize that I had missed out on about a decade of my life of developing some tools I really needed to be a young adult. And I started implementing these things, and I realized that if I start drinking again, I'm not going to be able to do these things that I've implemented. Like the two don't go hand in hand for me. I can't get up early, always keep my emotions in check, not create damage that I have to then clean up if I'm drinking. And if I do those things, I'm going to lose the progress that I've made. So at that point, it kind of became a choice where it was kind of a no-brainer choice. This is better for me to stay sober, to live this way. And if I don't have to drink, but I get all of this in return, I'm cool with that.
Well, let's drill in on a couple things you said there. First off, do you mind me asking how old you are? I don't know how old you are.
I'm 34.
34. So you said as a young man, so I wanted to know that. The other thing that you said a minute ago that I think a lot of people, I hear this one a lot, Sebastien, is this, I don't know how else to say it, but a hang up or this thing about, can I quit forever? I've got a buddy that I just met with a couple days ago, and he's been mostly sober for a couple of years. And this is the refrain for him. It's like, I don't know about forever, right? And this is a problem for him. Let's bat that one around a little bit, because I think it's an interesting one. Where are you at with that concept of have you quit forever? And is that a problem in your mind and your heart?
It's not a problem at all. I have quit forever. I don't think, well, I think I'm pretty stubborn to say that I can't do something pretty much ever. If I say I can't do something, it's because I really believe that I can't. And I have it in my head that I could probably do it, like drink and keep it under control. To me, it's not worth the maintenance and it's not worth the risk. Because if I'm being really honest, I can't. I've tried enough. I think I have enough data, enough trial and error to tell me that it's not for me.
Yeah.
So if I overthink it, that's where I get into trouble. For me, it's best just not to consider it as an option. I'm very happy with how I'm living my life and I don't miss it. So then when I start thinking about forever, that's where it gets a little dicey. I mean, no, I don't want to think about that. But I know that it's forever. So it's kind of like, we all know we're going to die one day. We don't think about it every day. I know I'm not going to drink again, but I don't spend my time telling myself that. I just live each day at a time.
That's an excellent strategy, and I'll bet you that that'll land in some ears that'll be helpful. And I'll share mine, which is a little different than yours, but similar in that, I heard a metaphor one time, and it works for me. I burned the boats in the harbor, and I came ashore. Like for me, like a lot of people are really big on the one day at a time, just today, et cetera, and that's awesome. I have that's wonderful, and it's true, right? It just so happens to be true. But for me, if I ever start to slip into thinking that I have another buddy who calls it, I have hope that I could drink normally. I mean, I'm in big trouble, man. And so for me, it is a full surrender, and it is a full acceptance that I have this thing. But I've heard this one before, Sebastien. Like, do you remember the transition of when you were like hung up on the, oh God, can I do this forever? And where you are now with it? Is there a transition through there? Is there a moment where you're at peace with it? Do you recall?
Yeah, definitely. I think at the beginning, I felt like I had something to prove, not necessarily to somebody, not even necessarily to myself, but it was like, this is a challenge and I can do it. And my last bit of drinking was a big wake up call. And I think I had to really show myself that I was in control. And over time, things started shifting. It shifted from it being something I can do to like, okay, I know I can do this, which then gets into dangerous territory because it's like, I can, do I have to? And I think if I wasn't in groups, I didn't want to go into a group and have to say I drank again. That was a big motivator. And so I didn't want to stop going to the groups. And that became a big thing. Is that my program became the thing that became more important to me than drinking. So the times that drinking would be like, oh, maybe I missed that, would be when I was out and about. And I really just have to remind myself all the time of why. And, it's, and sometimes it's a positive thing. Like I'll take stock of, oh, I'm not seeing that many people drinking here, or I'm seeing somebody nurse this drink for an hour. I mean, I'd be like on my sixth drink in an hour. And then sometimes it's, you take stock of like the drunk person in the room, you go, thankfully I'm not that person today. Early on, it was a lot of that. The biggest thing is eventually I started noticing changes in how I was living my life in terms of when bad things would happen or stressful things would happen and how I would react to them. And slowly over time, I noticed the reactions changing. And I just, like now when I think about this concept of I need a drink, like I'm at this event or I had a hard day or it's my birthday, this concept of I need a drink. I don't feel like I need one to get through, enjoy, put it behind me, whatever it might be, the situation at hand. I don't feel like I need a drink to manage those things. I have those tools internally at this point.
Yeah, and let's just have a conversation with ourselves a while back. Like, that's amazing, right? Somebody that's hearing this that's still in, in that period of time that it sounds like our stories have some similarities, right? That period of desperate moderation or whatever you want to call it, control, whatever. To hear what you just said would have been like very difficult for me and hopeful both, because when I was on the other side of this thing, what you just said would have been very difficult. And in fact, I probably wouldn't have kept listening because it would have been too painful to hear that. Like, this guy has just said that there is life and fun and tools and the ability to do life without drinking, right? And I didn't think that was possible. So just speaking to that person, if there is one that's listening in, here's two guys that are sitting here talking about doing stuff and not needing, to use your word, a drink. How about that?
Yeah, I wouldn't have believed it before this. And I remember meeting people early on, like trying out an AA meeting or talking to people who are sober. I really got underneath my skin to hear people like put it on a pedestal, essentially. A, I did not believe them. B, I didn't want to be preached to. Also, I kind of had this feeling of like, that might work for you, but like, that's not, like, I like what I'm doing. I like drinking. I like living this way. I really did. I didn't see a problem with it other than, in this like mindset that I created for myself where, well, if I just get it like this, then it won't be a problem. That's what I mean when I say I didn't see a problem. I knew that I had to like tweak it. I knew it was a little out of control. I knew it was more than other people. I knew that there were little obsessive things I would do that other people wouldn't do, like, thinking about, like, I'm sure other people didn't think about things like, am I going to have enough to get through X period of time? That was a big one for me. Do I have enough in the house, or should I go out now before I start drinking? Just in case. I don't know how much I'm going to drink tonight, but like, there should be enough, because like, I don't want to be irresponsible and have to get in the car and go out later. I bet most people don't think about things like that.
Yeah, I laugh. The tragedy of it. I've been right in that spot with, hundreds of times. And to not have that going on is a big deal. The word has popped up a couple times. I'm not sure that I've ever really explored this with you. The word you brought up a couple times now is program, right? So I like to use that word for myself too. I have a program. It's changed over time. It has chapters in it. Let's talk about your program. What's your program?
Well, I'm a very habitual person in general, which, didn't help out with my drinking, but has helped out a lot in my recovery and in my program. I have a few meetings that are must-go-tos in the week. I definitely do more than that, but there's like a minimum amount that I'll say is like a requirement for my week. By that, I don't mean a certain number. I mean like certain groups I like to go to, one of them being ours that we have together. And that's a core foundation. I feel like that keeps me grounded, and it's something I look forward to, and it's a good reminder. I mean, at first it was a place for me to vent, and over time it turned into a place where I feel like I rarely vent. And I'm really there because I want to check in with my friends and see what everyone's going through. And I enjoy the topics of conversation. And every so often we get lucky and get some newcomers, and that always takes me down memory lane a little bit. And it's always great to see how different my relationship is to early days of sobriety through the lens of who I am now versus what they're going through. What they're going through, I mean, everyone's situation is different, but when you boil it down to what's the crisis at hand, it was the same crisis at hand that we all had when we got in. And I find that I'm a different person every time I hear that story when we get new people in the meetings. So that's a big part of my program. Another big part of my program is just finding ways to compete or stay ahead of the reasons that I drink. I feel like I get a lot of anxiety when things pile up on me and I feel like I'm not in control of a situation. So just staying on top of things that need to get done in my life. And that was a hamster wheel of a situation when I was drinking, because I get, go on a little bit of a bender, responsibilities pile up, and there's a lot to do when I get out of the bender. And then it's like, well, I'm so stressed out, I start drinking more because I'm stressed out. So I know that that's a type of pattern for me, and I try to avoid that by just sticking to things like to-do lists, exercise routine, anything that just makes me feel like I am accomplishing stuff and staying on task. And that keeps me hopeful. Being hopeful keeps me inspired to stay sober.
Love it. All right. So I know about the meeting that we go to. I've got quite a bit of AA in my past. What do you hit other meetings? Do you hit AA meetings, or what other meetings do you go to?
Earlier on, I hit more AA meetings, and I hit more meetings similar to the one that we go to in different cities, but by Zoom. Another pillar of my recovery has been through my health provider. I'm with Kaiser Permanente, and they have an addiction medicine department. And I did an outpatient rehab with them. And it's kind of like over the last few years, decreased in frequency as it's supposed to, as you get, more adapted. And, they encourage that you find outside groups. But at first there was, I was going to groups there 5 days a week. Some of them were like a good portion of the day, like they were 3 hours long. And I also had other AA meetings I would go to in the same day. So like I was like basically like being at rehab minus being at the actual rehab. And over time, it initially went from 5 days a week down to 3 days a week. Now I still go 1 day a week for a meeting there, and that's a big part of my recovery. And what's been helpful about that for me is that it's a more medical and therefore scientific approach that just clicks with me more. I know you've shared about this a lot. The God thing was a difficult thing for me to wrap my head around at first, and not just specifically God, but the way God is spoken about in meetings. It just, when you pair that concept, which for me is like, I don't know exactly how I feel about it. I'm a little indifferent because I'm a very proof-based person, and I don't know how to make a decision on that. But when you pair that early on with a bunch of stuff that I'm like, well, I know that's impossible, which I'm referring to drinking, like not drinking, that sounded impossible to me. And so you pair that with the God thing, it was very hard for me to wrap my head around. I didn't have that in the meetings through my health provider. So everything was more about like what alcohol actually does to your brain scientifically, what it does to the rest of your body, and how, from a mental health standpoint, how to tackle this obsession with alcohol. That was really helpful for me.
Yeah.
And through that, because I saw that working, I was able to reapproach AA through this process and become more and more open to it, because I started learning that higher power, I agree with that. I do not think I am the end all be all of my existence by any means. And I never disagreed with that. But I think also early on, it was, I think I was looking for, if I'm being honest, I was looking for things to disagree with. I did not want to agree that I was an alcoholic. And like you, I did not want to say that word.
Right. Right. Well, there's so much in there that resonates with me. So the Kaiser Permanente meetings that you had then. So I just went and did a panel. There's a local recovery center here in the AA group that's local here. They go in and have a panel from time to time. And that's the only experience I have with the inside of one of those rooms. But they have the AA traditions and steps on the wall. My original sponsor, Steve, who's in my podcast as well. He has worked in recovery for quite a while, and he used to work he worked in two facilities, one that did this was step-based and one that wasn't, right? Because he found, like you and like me, I'm just going to have a hard time. I'm going to have a hard time with some things. And that's a pretty broad statement. Like, things can be any number of things. I'm going to be stubborn. I'm going to be questioning. And so, yeah, that was really hard for me as well. So tell me a little bit about what those meetings were like that were more, as you say, science-based. What kinds of things were happening in those rooms that were helping you have some self-discovery, towards understanding your predicament?
There was so much, like there were different people that you would meet with that would hold meetings, and all of them had a different approach, and some of them I liked, some of them I didn't like as much. Over time, I've learned to see the value and even the things I didn't like. But sometimes you go to a meeting and they show you a TED Talk, which I find interesting. And so like there's been a lot of topics that were discussed in sort of that forum, and then that would spring a discussion. I learned things like how, forget the exact, I took away the point. I don't know if I remember all the exact data, but like about how much stimulus our brains pick up in any given second, and how we focus on things based on what our brain thinks it's supposed to focus on. And so, and that forms our opinions. And then, there's this kind of circular effect of how then things get reinforced, and maybe understand how over time I could learn to not let things bother me as much, or not make things such a big deal. A big one was learning the dopamine aspect of our disease. You actually sent me a video once that broke that down as well. And that was very helpful in understanding how, because that was a big thing also for me, was I didn't really get this concept of disease. If I'm being completely honest, before getting sober, when people would call alcoholism a disease, I thought that they were just using a cop-out for they have no self-control and they're blaming it on something. And so, of course, if that's how I thought about alcoholics, there's no way I was going to call myself one. And so I think learning about what that disease actually is, that was helpful in me acknowledging that I fall into that category and seeing that there's a way out. If all my brain was really doing was seeking dopamine, okay, well, there's a lot of ways to get it. And I might have to work a little harder to get it, but I can get what I'm looking for. And that gave me hope, because when you first have to stop drinking, it's like, well, what is going to fill that void? Like praying, like doing step work, okay, great. I'm sure that that's helpful, but like, seriously, what is actually going to replace that substance that you're not having? Like, I couldn't understand that. And when I got down to the science of what was actually happening in your brain when you drink, when you're having cravings, and learning how over time right activities, you can um, you can find that chemical effect, the exact same chemical effect. I mean, minus, intoxication, but like the craving aspect, you can rewire that essentially.
Yeah.
And that made me hopeful.
Yeah, it's a big deal, and a lot of addiction medicine will lean on this work. And so, if anybody's listening to this, there's a gentleman named Dr. Kevin McCauley. You can type his name in, Dr. Kevin McCauley, and he did a really nice piece. It's a little slicker than the one that I sent you, although the one I sent you is my favorite. But he's got a DVD collection called Pleasure Unwoven that is fantastic, and he's in recovery, and he speaks directly to the concepts that Sebastien was just talking about. And when I saw that stuff too, it cut me some slack, man, because I spent so many years berating myself, believing the former. This is a willpower issue, right? This is character deficiency, you weakling, all that stuff. And when I found out that, in fact, I'm wired to want the booze on the same level as food and air, suddenly it explains some things about why the willpower is toast. And that helped me a lot too. I'm glad that helped you too.
Yeah, it was really helpful. And I'm also learning about how with the dopamine release, like for instance, when you're eating, the dopamine is not released when you swallow food, it's released when you're chewing food. So when I applied that to drinking, I was like, oh, I'm not even actually getting this effect from that, like from metabolizing the alcohol. I'm getting this simply from putting the alcohol in my mouth and knowing that like my brain is wired to think like, okay, you're taking an alcohol, we like that. And that's where you're getting that great feeling. And that also made me understand why I would get drunker than I wanted to, because I wasn't a craving to be more intoxicated. It was just a craving to put more booze in my body. And which is nuts, because it's like you're full essentially. Like if you were eating, you'd be full, but we all do that. Like we eat more than we should of something when it tastes good. Like this is the same thing. And so when I was able to understand that, it put a lot of into perspective that there's no, oh, I've had enough to drink, I'm intoxicated enough, I'll stop here. Because it was never about how intoxicated I was.
Yeah, well said. That's an interesting little thing we just went through there. I'm glad we did that. I want to drill in on one more, at least one more. Who knows what'll happen? But one more concept about your program that is basically a question to see if it. I have a theory, right? And I'm not alone in this theory about addiction recovery or addiction medicine or whatever words you want to use. That having human contact is an important element towards getting relief. I'm going to use the word relief, to getting relief. I've seen heard enough stories. I've got my own story. I've found that to be almost universal, that this idea that you can do it by yourself I haven't seen it play out very well. So with your story and your perspective, what do you think of that theory?
I agree that you can't do it by yourself, and on a few different levels. One, I think part of my program in recovery was finding the groups that were for me. And in that, it's really the people in that group. I mean, you take the meeting we go to, you take that same meeting time every week from me, but you swap everyone out and I'm there, it's all new people. I don't know that meeting at that time is my savior. It's really the collective group that we have. Same with other groups that I go to. And the other area that I've experienced that is, it's regardless of if they're other sober friends of mine or not sober friends of mine, I'm having better human contact, period. My relationships with people are better. There's less drama in my life. When I go out, I'm more present. I work in the music industry, and a big thing for me when I first got sober was, well, concerts. How am I going to do that sober? How is that going to be fun? I found that it's fun like it was when I was 13, and you go to a concert, like, music is awesome. It stopped being that for me when I was drinking, and I didn't even know it. I didn't realize that it didn't matter that there was music playing or not. I was just there for the bar. And so I've reconnected with that. And I've also found in a social situation where alcohol is around me, I've safely navigated towards hanging out with the right people in that setting. And I've built relationships with people that maybe I wouldn't have hung out with. A lot of times at parties, there's always that other room where, the really fun stuff is going on. And, I'd always be in that room at a certain point in the night, and I found myself not scanning the party for who has the best drugs, or, hanging out with the people that were pounding shots, but just hanging out with people that are having interesting conversation that I'm interested in. So I'm sure a lot of people, what I mean by that, I'm not saying that some people aren't interesting. I'm saying that we have something that we're mutually interested in, and I'm, building those connections, and it's not based on my drinking or drugging patterns, but more so based on my intellectual curiosities, and where that overlaps with other people and their conversations I probably wouldn't have had because I would have been off with a different group of people, or just too drunk to really have a meaningful conversation with somebody.
Yeah. Wonderful segue, because near and dear to my heart is the music industry, right? Musicians, roadies, people that work around the craft of creating music. There's a lot of us that get into trouble with drugs and alcohol. Some of us don't make it, right? And my story intersects with music and with a lot of people that had trouble, including this guy, right? And so, I know that you're still in music, and you just painted a really nice picture of being at a party and how you navigate that. But I'd love to just explore that a little bit more with you. I think most laymen out there think of the people that are in the music industry. They've got ideas in their mind of what that looks like, and I think that there's can be some truth to it. You live it, man. You go to concerts, you work with musicians, you work with venues. What do you see? And I don't know, is it painful sometimes to see what you're seeing through this new lens of yours?
Well, I was worried that I was going to feel like I was missing out. And I don't feel like I am. And I actually feel like I've gained a lot by not partaking. So my viewpoint there is pretty straightforward. I am proud of myself now that I show up and I'm there to do my job, because it is work. And, even if I was still somebody that drank, responsibly, it's not, it's just one person's opinion. It's not responsible to be blasted when you're working. And I think where I have, I wasn't able to master how do you just have one. So I honestly, I don't know how other people do it. It's not something I can really understand. It's kind of foreign to me. How do you show up and have a drink with everybody in an environment where it's encouraged? You're in a bar, everyone else is doing it, especially if you're the act that's performing that night. Everyone's trying to buy you a drink, be nice to you. Like, it's all comes from a good place. And or you're getting drink tickets, or you have a green room where they've stocked it with alcohol. It's all free, and it's in your face, and it's tempting. You're either having a good time, or you're on edge or nervous because your show is happening. I see this now, and I just think to myself, I am so glad I don't have that element of trying to figure out the balance of it for me. And sometimes I wonder how other people do that. Kind of don't wonder that as much anymore. Where it gets hard for me is sometimes I see people making mistakes that I used to make, and it's, nothing I can do about it. Sometimes those mistakes affect me. That can be annoying. I try to be sympathetic, or not sympathetic. I'm not having sympathy. I'm not like, I feel like that came out the wrong way. I am, I've been there, and so sometimes I think like that sucks. They're not really having as great of a time as they think that they're having, or they're going to regret that tomorrow, or what a missed opportunity. Sometimes it affects me because those missed opportunities affect me, or somebody embarrasses themselves, and therefore, but yeah, I mean, as far as having to live it every single, I mean, I don't go out every single day, but I don't find it difficult anymore to be around alcohol. And I thought it was going to be extremely difficult. And especially early on, I didn't really want to advertise that I was sober. I had to figure out, how am I going to go to something and turn down a drink? And I didn't want, at first, because that whole alcoholic stigma, and the way that I thought about alcoholics personally, I wouldn't want anyone to think about me that way. So when I would first go out, I didn't want to say I'm sober. Like that word also was like, that was up there with alcoholic. I mean, it was not as bad to me, but it was like, you don't say you're sober, so I'm not drinking. And that's what I would say, because I didn't want people to know I was sober. And for so many reasons. One, that was the point of no return. You tell someone I'm sober, you ever decide to drink again, you're that person. You're not somebody that you're an alcoholic that couldn't keep it together at that point. And I wasn't ready to commit to that at first. And I guess, if I'm being honest with myself, part of that was keeping a door open for myself if I ever changed my mind. But also a lot of it, and the main reason, was the shame that I felt would be associated towards me if I were to publicly identify as that. But over time, I have become proud of my sobriety, not in a way where I think I'm better than, but I feel like it's part of my journey, and it's something that I'm really proud that I was able to navigate my way through a really difficult time in my life, and be a happier, healthier person now. So I definitely don't mind people knowing that I'm sober. I've also found that, it can be a little annoying. Like, I remember one time I was at a party and somebody kept trying to get me to take shots of them, and I was politely declining. And it would have been so much easier just to tell that person, I don't drink, like, I'm sober. They're just trying to be nice, but it was annoying for me in that moment to have to keep saying no to something. And it would have just been easier to say, oh, no, thank you, I don't drink, or I'm sober. But I couldn't bring myself to do that early on. And so now that I don't run around saying I'm sober all over the place, but now that I'm comfortable with it, I find that it doesn't even come up so much. I kind of was hyper focused on that aspect of my identity for my early sobriety. And once I got past that, it was very much smooth sailing.
Yeah, man. Well, so yeah, so you're on a podcast, right? So there's a comfort level that you're willing to say this to the public, right? And one of the things, a couple things that you've said just now is I'm that guy. I'm the guy trying to get you to take a shot, right? I'm that guy. I'm also the guy that when you say, no, thank you, I'm a sober guy, I'm irritated by that, right? So, as I've gotten louder with this podcast and the things I'm doing at the company I work for, Cisco Systems, I'm keenly aware of me listening to some of this stuff, right? And one of the things that's really important to me, and I hope I'm having some success at it, is that I don't come off as you say, better than anybody, or soapboxing or judging or any of that kind of stuff, because that's toxic for me back when I was, getting my curiosity toward, uh, my jumping off point. So, as you move around in the world and you say these things and you hop on a podcast with, your friend Brett on this, internet thing, you know, how do you think about that? Like when you're in public settings or with family and friends, is it something that you'll say earlier then, or will you hold back until the moment happens? And anything around what I just said about soapboxing and stuff, does that resonate with you? Were people that were noisy irritating to you like they were to me?
Yes, and it's not just around sobriety. In general, I'm very conscious of myself and something I find irritating in other people. Um, Around a variety of situations. So I've been aware of that, and I definitely like the way I view it is like the way I'm living my life is working for me. It's not the way everyone has to live their life, and I don't feel the need to spread the word of sobriety at all. So for me, it's a very personal thing. When I'm going out, like I mentioned, like sometimes it's a kind thing just to let somebody know that you don't drink. So that way they're not offering you stuff. They're just maybe trying to be hospitable or friendly, or, they're not. I've yet to encounter, and I probably won't encounter this, can't imagine it, but I've yet to encounter somebody be like, sober, what's that? No, just drink. So I don't think that, I'm sure that happens. In fact, I actually have been in meetings and I've heard people talk about that happening. So it does happen. I haven't encountered it yet personally. But it's just so much easier for me to let people know that I don't drink. And there have been times where that's led into a whole conversation about sobriety. I find it incredibly interesting when it's a conversation, interesting in a good way, conversation with somebody where I can tell that they're curious about not drinking, but they're nowhere near ready to stop drinking. And I've always treated that very delicately because I can identify with that. I was never brave enough to ask them questions about not drinking, even when it piqued my curiosity. So, I do try to navigate that by letting people know what my experience is like without doing anything to make them feel judged, because I have no right to judge anybody. And it's either something that you want to do or you don't want to do. And as we all know, nobody can make you do it. So I like to pass on the information, like an open book about what sobriety has been like for me. So, if you ask me questions, I'll answer them. But I don't go around looking to start that conversation. I think the exception to that is you bump into another sober person and you guys start trading some stories. And with that, it's kind of like, I see how far I can push it. I try to gauge what their comfort level is. And, it's also time and place. Like, are we in earshot of other people that maybe we don't want to share these stories around? So I try to be mindful of that. Especially if it's a work event, you don't want to be like sharing stories about something inappropriate in front of somebody's boss.
So Sebastian, what the heck do you do? I think you said you're an artist manager. What does that mean? What's your work entail in the music industry?
So yes, I am an artist manager. I got my start doing A&R. For those of you who don't know, A&R stands for Artists and Repertoire. And that's a department at a record label which does a variety of things. It looks into signing new talent to the record label, and it oversees the recording process with artists once they're signed, to get songs and albums ready to be put out to stores. Through that process, I was working at a major label, and through that process and learning more about everything that an artist does, I found my way into artist management, as I was really interested in all aspects of an artist's career: the touring, merchandising, music synchronization, which is putting music to film, television, advertisements, video games, and also other things artists might find their way into. Sometimes that's philanthropy, sometimes it's acting, to various types of businesses or projects. And being an artist manager gives you the ability to work alongside the artist in multiple aspects of their career, not just the recording. So I still get to work heavily in the recording process, but then I also work directly on the marketing aspect, touring, and anything else that we might be able to do together.
Sweet. Well, I think at least a few folks, including me, would probably dig having links to your social media. Is it cool if we put those in the show notes?
Yeah, definitely.
So Sebastien, I'm stoked that you were willing to come do this conversation. I've learned a lot from you. You're an incredibly insightful person, and I think even this conversation has been enlightening to me on a few levels. I really appreciate you being on the podcast. Any final words here as we close up the sesh?
Well, I'm so happy that we did this. I've been enjoying your podcast since you started doing it. It's crazy, like how much, we've learned about each other in meetings. And then I've learned even more from listening to your podcast. I hope that I was able, as with your other stories that I've heard myself, I hope that I was able to inspire somebody that's listening, especially if they're curious about sobriety. That took me a long time to get into. And, I'm recalling that actually podcasts were the area that I felt more comfortable exploring this back when I was still drinking. There were a few that I would listen to, and hearing people talk about sobriety without being preachy about it was a big part of me adopting sobriety as even a potential idea. So I hope that anybody listening that's sober or newly sober or curious about getting sober, I hope that this is inspiring, or that they find it to be helpful to maybe consider doing this. And if not, that's, also okay. And then, thank you for having me on.
Yeah. Right on, Sebastien. Thanks for your time tonight, man. Really, really fun having a chat.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, another podcast in the bag here. Sebastien, great conversation, my friend. Really grateful to have met you these years ago, and for all the conversations that we've partaken in together at our meeting. And I'm glad you were willing to come on the podcast. I think we covered some really good topics. That if a person is curious, they'll probably be able to get some info out of that's useful. I just think that, this disease, it gets in the way in terms of, when you equate getting drugs and alcohol into your system on the same level as air and water and food, like it's difficult to, let go of that discovery towards, well, maybe I don't need it like I need air, water, and food. But it's a journey, right? Some people it happens right away. Some people it takes time, but it really starts with curiosity. And the way you get to curiosity is by hopefully having access to things that will help you in that regard, so that the shame and the stigma that seems to surround this disease, keeps people quiet, keeps people from this kind of discovery. And I just want to be another voice that's out there just going, okay, it's no big deal. I have this thing. Many do. Here's some stuff. People with a condition that is not going to go away, and this is what we do. Or, these are the things that some of us do, and I'm trying to bring you a variety of topics. So, Sebastien, I think we did great. Until next time, I hope everybody's doing well. Thank you.